As you approach the Amazon River from the Atlantic, you get a true feel on how large of a system it is. Cruise ships traveling up the Amazon are not limited by the size of the ship due to depth. Some area of the Amazon River is 150 feet deep. You'll see the water flowing, the color changing miles upon miles before you reach the river itself. Then when you reach the river, island after island after island within the river. The delta of the Amazon stretches over 200 miles from end to end. This is a distance greater than London to Paris. You'll see the water flowing, the color changing miles upon miles before you reach the river itself.
I have to talk about a bet I lost. Those of you who watch Peter's show on Channel 21, I was challenged to get a manicure. I was told I had to. I said, no, they're not going to do my nails. I made a deal that if they did it and it didn't bother me and I actually liked it, I'd have to say so. I wish I could tell you I hated it. 51 years I went without anything ever done to my hands. And I have to say, the hand massage was great. Don't even go for the manicure, the hand massage. And I'll tell you what, facial might be next. Ladies and gentlemen, Devil's Island. Now, a few things. I talked about safety before in my first talks. Before I start off with Devil's Island itself, I want to talk to you about the heat and humidity. You're on board the vessel, you're drinking a little bit of red wine, maybe a martini or two, eating some richer food. Please hydrate yourself. By this, I mean drink plenty of water whilst ashore and on board the vessel. The most damage I've ever seen to guests in any way is dehydration. So please, whilst you're on board, drink plenty of water. When going ashore, drink plenty of water. And if you want to get used to the humidity in the tropics, when you go to lunch today, put a piece of pound cake in your mouth and try to breathe through it. That'll get you used to the 80-some-odd% constant humidity where we're going. So in that way, please do get used to the humidity and adjusting yourself with plenty and plenty of fluids. Now, Devil's Island itself. We're going into Devil's Island, which is part of French Guiana. Population of all of French Guiana is 203,400 roughly. 90% of the population is located next to the capital of Cayenne. The only population on the islands, of the Salvation Islands, the Salute Islands, are the staff working on them and those working for the Ariane space program. The tracking center, I'll show you photos of that in a few moments, is located on the Isle of Royale. Matter of fact, on April 12th, a satellite will be launched from the Ariane space program over in Kourou, which is 12 miles away from Isle of Royale. And that will be launching the first satellite ever by Vietnam being put up into space. So they do have a lot of satellites going off. Matter of fact, right now, one of their unmanned programs just docked with the International Space Program. So it's a very large space program. And the tracking center, as I said, is located on the Isle of Royale. You'll get to see that. The elevation is 131 feet above sea level on Royale. The currency is expensive. It's the euro, approximately about $1.70 to buy 1 euro. And there is, in the bank on the island, there is one obligatory souvenir shop. I'll show you a photo of that also. And there isn't a post office per se, but you can buy postcards. And buying postcards is not inexpensive, and mailing them is not inexpensive, but they will do it there for you. There's a little mail drop box, and they go over to the mainland on French Guiana, and it's mailed from there. The religion is mostly Roman Catholic. The literacy rate is 85%. Now the distance, we will tender into the Isle of Royale. I will show you photos in a moment, walking from the tender docks up to the ruins, the old hospital, the churches, and also the restaurant and the hotel. It is a rather steep walk. It is not a paved area at all. It's a very rough walk, uneven stones. Please, once again, flat, comfortable shoes. I made a joke about people with heels, but this is actually a port. I did see a woman get off with 3-inch heels to walk. And what happens is on the rocks and on the paths, there's a lot of moss. And if it's damp, which humidity always brings, or raining, it's a very, very slippery walk. So please, flat, comfortable shoes in that way. Dress, now, we are in the period of the rainy season from December until July. 150 inches of rain per year. When I show you the photos, you will see beautiful blue sky. You'll see a couple photos later, absolutely torrential downpour. These were taken on the same day. Do not, if you leave the vessel by tender, because there's a blue sky outside, do not say, oh, I do not need my rain gear. You'll need an umbrella, some type of rain gear with you from now until you leave Manaus. You're going into the tropics. It is rainy season now in this area, so please do bring with you some type of rain gear or umbrella. As I said before, you are waterproof. Water is not going to go through you. It comes out of you. But you have your electronics, your binoculars, and things in that way. We don't want you to have those ruined. It can go from a beautiful blue sky, torrential downpour, and then blue sky again, all in a matter of minutes. Also, once again, for the shoes, you do have a lot of a red clay type dirt on Devil's Island, also where we're going into Brazil. Once again, when you get back to your cabin, use a little bit of shampoo on the side of your shoes and get that dirt off, because if it dries, it turns into a dust, and if you pack it inside your suitcases, it will get into your clothes itself. Now, the introduction, it's officially called Departmente de la Guyana, Overseas Department of France. It's located on the northeastern coast of South America. The entire landmass of French Guiana is 3,400 square miles. It's surrounded by the Atlantic to the north and east, Brazil to the south and east, Suriname to the west, and again, the capital of the country is Cayenne. Some of the wildlife you may experience will be agoutis, which is a giant guinea pigs, monkeys, also a vast array of tropical birds on the island. Now, the mainland population of French Guiana is mostly Creole with a mixed descent. The principal language is French, with the additional dialects of Creole Patois and a local dialect called Taki-Taki. That is actually the word, T-A-K-I, T-A-K-I. The economy's been on the upswing because of the European space program at Kourou, and it supplies over 1/4 of French Guiana's gross domestic product. Overall, French Guiana now boasts one of the highest gross national products of all of South America. The leading exports are shrimp, forest products, gold, demerara rum, sugarcane, limes, bananas, and tropical fruits, most all sent to France itself. Now, the island group we'll be visiting is called the Salvation Islands, which are made up of St. Joseph's, St. Royal, and Devil's Island itself. We'll be visiting St. Royal, the largest and only inhabited island of the three. And here you'll get to witness the hospital, the children's cemetery, lighthouse, and various ruins of the penal colony. As I said, here you'll also find the obligatory gift shop and a small hotel. About 3 times ago I was in, there was actually people staying in the island for 1 full week. And when you see the islands, everything else, you'll be able to see it in about 1.5 hours. I have no idea what you would do for a week at Devil's Island. Now, they do accept dollars at the restaurant. They have beer, sodas, and I said it's very, very expensive. One thing I will show you photos to see the actual island, Devil's Island. The restaurant area right outside is the best viewing spot. Now, for history-wise, Devil's Island, I'll explain, we are going to quote-unquote Devil's Island. Devil's Island itself, the island Devil's Island, was the last island used as a penal colony. The penal colonies were established at Kourou, and then St. Joseph's and St. Royal, and the last one, Captain Dreyfus was brought over to, was Devil's Island. So, when you hear Devil's Island, it doesn't mean Devil's Island. It meant the group of the 3 islands. And that was, again, Devil's Island was the last one to be populated with prisoners. First discovered by Columbus in 1496, the Spaniards started to explore the region in 1500, and the first permanent settlement was established by Spain in 1503. In 1624, French merchants arrived from the French city of Rouen. Merchants then followed from Paris and founded the city of Cayenne in 1643. In 1664, the Dutch took over possession of Cayenne. 3 years later, in 1667, the Treaty of Breda awarded the entire territory to France, although it wasn't until 9 years later they were able to drive the Dutch out of Cayenne itself. In 1763, 12,000 French colonists were brought to French Guiana with the promise of free land and tales of easy gold to be found. Quickly, 10 of the 12,000 expired from tropical storms, floods, malaria, yellow fever. The remaining 2,000 fled the mainland to the islands to the north and renamed them the Salvation Islands, hence the names of the islands we're going to. For a time, the islands were also used as a leper colony. During the early 18th century, France had decided that criminals should be made use of instead of merely put away. Many were sentenced to a life on the seagoing galleys, who were seagoing ships powered by oars. When the galleys were superseded by modern steamships and the more modern way of sea travel, the French government built huge prisons right inside the ports. At the seaports, the men were chained together in pairs and were given an unbearable life of forced labor. Upon France abolishing slavery in 1848, it was decided that to utilize these criminals to colonize their overseas possessions. In 1852, the French began using French Guiana, including the Salvation Islands and Kourou on the mainland, as penal colonies. The original French inhabitants who arrived prior to the establishment of the penal colonies did not receive French citizenship until 5 years later in 1877. The penal colonies themselves were established during the Second Empire under Napoleon III. The prisoners were sentenced to Devil's Island for two reasons. First was a way to remove prisoners from France itself. The second was to populate the area of French Guiana. And what happens if you were sentenced to 5 years at the penal colonies? You had to spend 5 years in the penal colony itself. Then you had to spend 5 years on the mainland before you could be brought back to France. You were paid nothing, you had to find how to get your own money to get back to France. If you were sentenced to over 8 years, majority of the time, you were sentenced to the rest of your life in French Guiana with no return to France. So basically, anything over an 8-year sentence could mean a death penalty in the country itself. From 1852 until 1939, 80,000 French convicts were sentenced to the penal colonies of French Guiana. Only 30,000 ever returned to France. The horrors of the penal colony became widely known to the rest of the world in 1906 with the negative publicity surrounding the plight of the Jewish French army captain Alfred Dreyfus, who was wrongly accused of treason and sentenced to Devil's Island. Dreyfus, with very few friends amongst his brother's officers, was convicted in 1894 for supplying Germany with military secrets. As a Jew, and therefore an alien, Dreyfus was the ideal suspect for this crime, unlike the real traitor, Ferdinand Esterhazy. Émile Zola, who was a very prominent writer at the time, he turned around and petitioned France and wrote in the newspapers many stories saying that the conviction was not correct. France then tried to sue him for libel, drove him out of France, and Émile Zola died without ever seeing what he wanted corrected actually corrected. For 5 years after his conviction, Captain Dreyfus was sentenced to solitary confinement on Devil's Island. They literally burnt down the old leper colony and built his solitary confinement area. He was one of the first prisoners, as I said, confined to the island, and he actually was put into a house. Not a small little cell, but a house. And the guards would guard him, make notes of everything he said and did, but they would not converse with him. They were not allowed. This drove him absolutely insane. It wasn't for months only later he was talking to himself, holding conversations with his wife, and once again he was there for 5 years. Upon his release, he returned to France and was once again charged with treason. It took 6 more years for his name to be cleared by a presidential pardon, and he was rehabilitated to the rank of major. But his more than 5 years in solitary confinement had taken its toll. It was only as recent as 1998 that then-President Chirac, in the name of France and the descendants of Dreyfus, apologized for the dark stain unworthy of our nation. As you're all aware, at the beginning of the movie Papillon, the name which denotes the butterfly tattoo, the eventual escapee, Henri Charrier. Now, if you like Papillon, I suggest you leave the room at this time, because I'm going to debunk a lot of what's put into the book and the movie. But at the beginning of the movie, you hear the infamous quote, "Welcome to the penal colony at Devil's Island, who prisoners you are, and from which there is no escape." The truth is, many did escape, but only a few ever lived to tell about it. Convicts sent to Devil's Island toiled under inhumane conditions. Many were actually worked to death. They were felling trees on the mainland, building roads. And this work was carried out in the ever-present threats of malaria, yellow fever, snakes, and crocodiles. Convicts who fell behind on their work quotas had their meager rations cut even farther, therefore putting them onto a death spiral. Convicts caught trying to escape were sentenced to at least 200 lashes. Workers caught shirking their duties were likely to be stripped naked, coated with molasses, and tied to an anthill all day in front of fellow prisoners as an incentive to the other convicts. Of those who did escape and were eventually captured, they would be subject to solitary confinement and forced to wear shackles and irons 24 hours a day, and received extra years to their sentence, therefore receiving a death sentence in French Guiana. Inmates had two ways to escape. They escaped by boat into the Atlantic Ocean or by making their way across the water into the mainland of French Guiana. Those who attempted to go through the mainland were ultimately confronted by the crocodiles of the Moroni River. Untold numbers died by the attacks of these crocodiles whilst trying to cross the river. Now, many accounts previously blamed piranhas for these deaths, and also in Brazil you hear all these stories about piranhas. There is not one documented case of a piranha ever killing a human being. Most of the time it was the crocodiles who bit the humans trying to cross rivers or in rivers, and what happens is the piranhas cleaned up. But there were no accounts ever documented of a piranha ever attacking and killing a person. Now, one famous escapee, the aforementioned Henry Charrier, Papillon, whose book was published in 1970 and the movie in 1973. Charrier did not escape, as the movie would have you believe, from Devil's Island. He escaped from the mainland on Cayenne. If you look at the movie, you'll see him in solitary confinement. He's then moved from solitary confinement to housing. The only housing for prisoners to live on was on the mainland itself. Devil's Island was the prison itself. So in that way, he did escape, but he escaped through the mainland, and that's how he made his way out. Also, they show all his previous attempts at escaping the island. That's all the stories he garnered whilst he was in the prison. He never did those escape attempts. Also, what he dictates in his book and shown in the movie, The Prison Life, that was the prison life 20 years prior to his arrival. But, as Hollywood says, never let the truth get in the way of a good story. Now, one person who did make his escape out of Devil's Island, and it was René Bellenoit, B-E-L-E-N-O-I-T, and he penned the book, Dry Guillotine. Dry guillotine was a terminology used by the convicts about the prison. But they coined it the dry guillotine because it killed you, but it didn't draw the blood. Now, Bellenoit escaped from Devil's Island. He made his way to New York City. He wrote the book. He married in New York City. And it's a very, very interesting book if you get it. And there's also Hell on Trial, and that's a trial prior to his sentence to Devil's Island. I recommend very, very much, if you want to read a true account, to pick up these two books. Now, France was not happy at all that he wrote the books and was living in New York City, and they tried to extradite him a few times. The United States made René Bellenoit a U.S. citizen, and he died in 1959 in New York City as a United States citizen. Now, his book was very, very instrumental at exposing the inhumane conditions on Devil's Island. Now, inmates who died on the prison system, I'll be showing a cemetery. The cemetery was the guards, their children, and their wives. And the inmates themselves who died on the islands were buried at sea with their shackles and irons on them for their weight. In 1938, the French government stopped sending prisoners to Devil's Island, and in 1952, the last prisoners of the island left and the prison ceased operation. Now, besides Captain Alfred Dreyfus and René Bellenoit, the Salvation Army is also credited with convincing France to close the penal colonies of French Guiana. To me, it's quite a conundrum that the Salvation Islands started out as a notorious leper colony, the infamous penal colony, for which many risked their life and limb to escape, and to now 50,000 people a year escape to it. You're going to find, once I said, the little hotel, the guards' barracks are actually hotel rooms. It's a quaint little place. But I'm going to ask you one personal favor. Use your mind's eye when I show you these slides and also when you're walking around. For basically the island, except for the very tops, were devoid of all trees and all vegetations to hinder any type of escape attempt. Now Mother Nature is taken back over. You'll see coconut palm trees everywhere. Absolutely gorgeous. Frangipani, bougainvillea. Gorgeous. It wasn't like that when it was a prison. And I ask you to, when you walk around, to use your mind's eye of what it must have been like at that time and the conditions. When you get off the tender, you're going to say, this is really comfortable. It's a nice light breeze. Once you walk into the island, the humidity, it hits you, the breeze stops, and in an hour and a half, you're going to feel the effects of walking around. Picture what it must have been like to be sentenced there. Now, in 1965, the government transferred the responsibility of most of the islands to the newly founded Guyane Space Program, and that's called the Adirondacka Space Program, in Kourou, and that's only 12 miles away. If it's a clear day when we pull up, I will be up on the Royal Lounge, and what I'll do is I'll give a little bit of a narration in the Royal Lounge as we drop our anchor. We're dropping anchor right about 12 o'clock, so probably about 11 o'clock. I'll go up to the Royal Lounge, join me there, I'll point out all the facts to you and everything else that way. If it's clear, you can actually see the launch towers on the mainland right over at Kourou. So you have an interesting view as we come in. Once again, I will be up in the Royal Lounge. I'll probably make an announcement from the bridge or have it scheduled in the patter. So come up and join me, and I'll point out all the sites for you. Now, actually, the islands themselves are in the direct path of the rocket launches. They have to evacuate the islands for the launches of the Adirondacka Space Program. But there is the tracking station. There's one gentleman inside the tracking station, and inside that station is one button. If that rocket goes off course, that's the destruct mechanism for the rockets. So they actually have the islands completely evacuated. They have to destroy the rockets as it's coming off, so it can't go into any other populated areas. Are you ready to go sightseeing? Yes. Let's go sightseeing. As here, the French flag. Now remember, the people of French Guiana vote in the presidential elections of France, prime minister, and they have full French citizen rights. Here you have the mainland right here. Here's Kourou, right, so the space station. You have Devil's Island over here. Here you have the capital of Cayenne. Here is the Devil's Island itself. Here's Royale, where we come in right here. And when you get off the tender, you'll be able to see St. Joseph's right over here for you. So it's right off the tender. I'll be showing you photos of the restaurant, which is up here, and the view from the outside of the restaurant at Devil's Island itself is absolutely gorgeous. Now, I show this for a reason. We have a very, very good captain on getting the vessel in. The captain prior to the captain on board missed Devil's Island 2 out of 3 times. We have not missed it, knock on wood, yet. But what he does, he takes the vessel, keeps the engines going, keeps the thrusters going, turns the vessel into the wind. Therefore, he cuts out most of the swell for the tenders. When you get on the tender, do remember, look at this right here, there is a swell. So please keep yourself seated, keep yourself secure until it's tied up to the tender dock. Here's the tender dock. It is a floating dock. They do ask, our safety officers ask that when you do get off the tenders, come off the dock as quick as possible on up, because once again, it is a moving floating dock, and for your safety, we don't want everybody standing on that dock. Here's the path coming up. I'll be showing you this sign in a moment. You go to your left. You come off the dock itself. Here's an area coming up. This is where you'll be walking the path this way. Goes in front of these buildings. This is the generator plant, and just some miscellaneous buildings. Have nothing to do really with the prison system at this time. Now you're going to be walking up the paths. This building right here, you'll see. It's a gray roof. It's a whitish with a little almost a pink color to it. That is the museum. Inside the museum, I'm going to show you photos in a second. There is everything written in French on boards. Look to the very left or the very right. There is very small English translations to the boards. That is the only English you're going to find on the island to explain to you anything about Devil's Island. So do stop into the museum itself. Now up here above the museum, that's the restaurant area. And as I said, it's a very steep path. Now this is a view down from the restaurant. I show this for one reason. Here is a local catamaran that comes over from the mainland. There's about 5 or 6 of these. They are French vessels. They have the rights for this dock when they come in. So if it is a wait for the tender, it's probably because one of these vessels came in and took over the tender dock. So have patience with us. We do not have the full rights. The French vessels have the full rights for that dock. Here you see a couple more things. Look over. This is the Isle of St. Joseph's right over here. Another shot for you. Now, you're coming off the tender pier. You walk up, you'll see steps. I'll show you that in a slide. And here is the area with the museum. Now, here is the pool I'll be showing you. You can go down, take a look at the waterfront, come back. Now, there's 2 ways of going up top. This is the quickest way, rather steep. This is a long way. It's not as steep, but it is about 3 times as long. So if you have a hard time with the straight up path, go over on this path. It's not even, that way it's a rough path, but it will get you up to the area. Here you have the barracks. Here you have the restaurant area. And you have the ruins of the solitary confinement. Over here is a cemetery. Here is the church and the lighthouse I'll be showing you. And this path here is where most likely, if they're around, you'll find all the monkeys I'll be showing you. Here is you walking up the path. Here's the steps that go up to the museum. If you go from the museum up, there are steps, but they're old, broken steps. I do not recommend continuing up from the museum. I recommend coming down, taking this path, which is a little steep, you can see all the moss on it, or taking this path, which is the one I told you is longer, but not as steep. So remember these areas here. Once again, I told you there's no signage really per se. So you have the steps to the museum, the steps for the steep path, which is a quicker way, and then the path that is a little longer, but not as steep. This here is the Commandant's Quarter, which you'll find right next to the museum. This is a view of the museum. And you can see from the photo there, the sky's getting darker and darker. Here's the front. Now the sun came out for a little while. You can see how quickly it changes. It's all the same time I'm in that area. And that's the front door to go into the museum itself. Very, very worthwhile to take about 15, 20 minutes. There's another building behind here with even more information. So definitely walk around in the museum area, and I recommend doing it prior to going up to the ruins themselves. This is actually taken out of the museum, off the board. This is Captain Dreyfus, and this is when he was let off the island. He put his military uniform on, and he saluted the guards who took care of him for the 5 years in solitary confinement. He was a true military gentleman. Here are the shackle and irons, true shackle and irons that the prisoners wore. Definitely look at how big and heavy they were, and I'll be showing you photographs of the buildings. And when you walk through the buildings, every building has bars that these were connected to. And even in the infirmary, they have bars where they connected the hands at night when they were sleeping and the feet. Here is a portrayal of a burial at sea. Buried with the irons are, and you can see the sharks, and that's actually our tender pier right there. It is. Okay, this is, I told you, you come up to the museum, you can come down the nature trail. This is a little agouti, but you can come down by the waterfront, and it's a beautiful, beautiful area, and then you can come back and take the path up. And the path here, you'll find all the termite mounds in the trees. Here is the Commandant's Pool. This is below the museum on the water. This was built by the prisoners as a hard labor detail. It was built by hand. Prisoners lost their lives to the sharks whilst building this, so the Commandant had a pool. You can see some of the beautiful tropical. And remember with your mind's eye, all this did not exist when it was a penal colony. Here is the path. You can see the grass, all the loose rocks, so please, once again, flat, comfortable shoes. Now you come off the path coming in, you have an open courtyard. Here you have the area where the guards lived, and over on the left you're going to see, there's a little agouti. Now agoutis are part of the guinea pig family. They are a pet for a lot of the children, till about a year and a half. They get a little ornery. They go from pet to pop when they get that way. Here's the church. Now, the lighting of the church is very dark. I could not get a decent photograph, but there is drawings depicting the life made by the prisoners inside the church. So definitely take a walk into the church itself. Here are the roofs on the side of the hospital, also the insane asylum. Front view of that, the rooms I just showed you there are off to that side. As you come around the side, here is the lighthouse. Another close-up view. Now when you're at the lighthouse, look in front of you. You'll see this clearing. This is the path to get down to the children's cemetery. It's not marked, so you need to go to the lighthouse, look down. Over on this side will be the Space Tracking Center. So you have a lighthouse over here, Space Tracking Center here, and a path that'll lead you down to the cemetery. And here is the cemetery itself. Now, just below there's a path. You walk along that path, keep around, there's normally people feeding bananas and kiwis and everything to them. This is a capuchin monkey. There's capuchins, woolly, and squirrel monkeys. There's a little squirrel monkey. And you can see they come right up. The squirrel, the capuchins and woolly won't come up to you, but the spider monkeys will come right up next to you with no fear at all. There they are. Now, as I said, you have the space station right there. You'll see the tracking center. That's a view of it right here, a helicopter pad, and the tracking. This here is the kitchen of the prison system itself. And you have next to it, I'll be showing you the prep room. Now, even in the prep room, there are the bars for the shackles. Every wall, everywhere you'll find them. Now, all these coconut palms were taken down about 3 weeks ago. 3 visits ago. The reason they were taken down is the coconuts. A guest from France was walking, who was staying on the island, and was injured very seriously by a falling coconut. So please be careful walking under these coconut trees you'll find, but they took all of these down for that reason. There's a view of the hotel use now. This was all the area used by the guards for living quarters. Here is the area of the infirmary and also solitary confinement. You'll see this wall. Go inside, you go to your left. Oh, there's the rain started right after I took that. Go to your left, you'll find the infirmary. Go to your right, you'll find the solitary confinement. This is not a solitary. This is actually held few prisoners, and it's no bigger than most solitary confinements are normally. Here's a solitary confinement. There were 3 boards put on top of there, and that's it. There's a door for the solitary confinement. Now to the opposite side you have the infirmary. Now remember I told you about the bars that held the shackles? On the wall, the bars for the shackles. Go around to the side, there's the toilets. These are the toilets for the prisoners, not yours. The only restrooms on the island are in the restaurant area itself. They're off to the left of the restaurant building. As I mentioned in the previous talk, where we're going on our visits, all places are required by law to have a restroom. There is no law that says they must stock them. Act accordingly. Now, as I mentioned before in the past, you can see here, it's raining, you got a very, very light moss on here. It's like ice skating, so please be very careful when walking around. Here you have the restaurant. Now, if you were looking at this behind your back, they have an area with peacocks, there's a couple macaws, toucans, all different beautiful birds. So make sure you do stroll around there. Here's the obligatory gift shop. I think it's $21 to $25 for a t-shirt. Now, here's the viewing area I told you about. This is a restaurant seating area. You go out to this area, and you can see it on the horizon there. This is what you'll see. That is the Devil's Island itself. Now, as I mentioned, remember, only the top part ever had trees, so it wasn't a beautiful looking island it is now. There's your agoutis, your peacocks. Here's the iguanas. There's iguanas all over. You'll see iguanas running around. That's a toucan. Some of the beautiful flora. Now, this is the reservoir. They had some cisterns, but they decided to build a reservoir also when the prisoners were on the island. Absolutely gorgeous, isn't it? Well, there's caimans inside of it, but it's also one of the work details that was done for hard labor. It was built by hand, rocks removed by hand, The dirt was removed by a spoon brigade. So when you see the beauty of the island, remember its history, and always try to keep that in the back of your mind. Ladies and gentlemen, that brings to a close my talk on Devil's Island. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you join me tomorrow morning for my talk on the Amazon, the flora and fauna, and man's impact to the Amazon. That'll be right here, I think, at 9:30. Then tomorrow, join me directly after that up into the Royal Lounge, and I'll give you some information as we pull into the Isle of Royale. Ladies and gentlemen, have a great day. Remember, you have dance class following this. You have the movie Papillon here at 12:15. You have the art auction. You have a plenty full day at sea. Enjoy.